Week 0 of college football starts in just a couple of days, and here are 5 sleepers to be in the college football playoffs this season. First up here is North Carolina State. North Carolina State was 9-4 last season. 3 of those 4 losses were by one possession, and they have very inconsistent quarterback play in the transfer portal. They got arguably the best quarterback in the transfer portal in Grayson McCall. Grayson McCall was the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year in 2020, 2021, and 2022 with Coastal Carolina. In that span, he was absolutely amazing for Coastal Carolina, throwing for 78 touchdowns and just 8 interceptions. This past season, he was hurt some, didn't play as many games, playing in just 7 games. He had a new head coach with Coastal Carolina, so I think that had a little bit to do with his kind of lackluster performance this past season for the Chanticleers, but this is a major upgrade for the Wolfpack. They also bring in Duke running back Jordan Waters, who had over 800 rushing yards for Duke last season. He is a much-needed boost to this North Carolina State running back group. They have one of the best wide receivers in the country, Kevin Concepcion. He had over 70 receptions, over 800 yards, and 10 touchdowns last season. North Carolina State has a very easy path to the college football playoffs. They avoid playing Louisville and Florida State, 2 teams who in the ACC championship game a year ago. They play Tennessee out-of-conference game. They play them on September 7th, and they also play Clemson at Clemson on September 21st. Honestly, I think North Carolina State could beat either one of these teams. I would not be shocked even if they beat both of these teams. That's how high I am on North Carolina State this season. The Tennessee game, that is a neutral site game. That game will be in Charlotte. But I expect North Carolina State to at least win one of those. Even if they have 2 losses, depending how some of these other teams, rank up, maybe there's still a situation where the Wolfpack can maybe get in the playoffs. But I think North Carolina State is definitely a team to watch out for as a sleeper to maybe be in the college football playoffs this season. Another team to watch out as a sleeper is Appalachian State. Appalachian State plays Clemson on September 7th, and they also host Liberty on September 28th. I'm very, very high on Appalachian State. They were 9-5 last season. 4 of their 5 losses from last year were by one possession. They returned star quarterback Joey Aguilar, who was the main reason for the Mountaineers' success last year. He threw for over 3,700 passing yards. He had 33 passing touchdowns and 10 interceptions. He had the 5th most passing touchdowns last season and the 7th most passing yards as well. Appalachian State will not be favored against Clemson, and they probably won't be favored against Liberty either, but I think they're going to beat Liberty. Liberty is probably the favorite to represent the Group of 5 in the college football playoffs this season because they have such a poor schedule. Meanwhile, when you look at Clemson, I'm very interested in this game. I honestly think Appalachian State can beat Clemson, and I think they will beat Clemson this season. I'm not high on Clemson. I'm very high on Appalachian State. It seems like every single time when the Mountaineers play a Power 5, a very good opponent, they always play up the competition and then make it a great game. This Appalachian State team lost by just 6 points against North Carolina and Drake May a year ago. The year prior, they only lost to North Carolina by 2 points, and they beat A&M when they were ranked in the top 10. In 2018, Appalachian State is 3-4 against Power 5 opponents, and in those 4 losses, it's only a total of 17 points. Those 4 losses, every single one was by one possession. So even when they have lost to, really big opponents, they've kept them close. Even if Appalachian State doesn't beat Clemson, I expect it to be a very, very competitive game. Appalachian State's biggest competition and biggest threat to them is Texas State, and they are fortunate enough to not have to play them in the regular season. But the odds of them playing each other in the Sun Belt championship game are very, very likely. I honestly think whoever wins that game between Texas State and Appalachian State will end up representing the Group of 5 in the college football playoffs this season. Appalachian State year in and year out are one of the best Group of 5 teams in the country, and I expect this year to be no different. Watch out for Appalachian State upsetting Liberty or Clemson this season and having an easier path to maybe go to the college football playoffs this year. Next up on his list is West Virginia. West Virginia might be the team I'm high on the most this year. They returned their star quarterback, Garrett Green. They had the best rushing attack among all Power 5 teams last season. They returned Green, C.J. Donaldson, and Jaheim White. That is one of the best trios you can get when it comes to rushing attacks of all of college football this year. They host Penn State to start off the year, and then they travel to Oklahoma State and travel to Arizona. Those are probably their 3 biggest games this year. I really think they can beat Penn State this season. I think Penn State's overrated. I don't think Drew Allar is that good. Oklahoma State, I think that might be a really good matchup. They were unable to stop Ollie Gordon last season, and Arizona, that should be a pretty good game as well. When you look at Garrett Green, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He had 16 touchdowns last season, 4 picks. He had over 770 rushing yards a year ago. to go along with 13 rushing touchdowns. Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson combined for over 1,600 rushing yards combined and had 15 rushing touchdowns together. West Virginia does not have an easy path to the college football playoffs, but they are fortunate that they do not have to play Utah on their regular season schedule. If they start off the season with a win against Penn State, that's going to increase their chances to make the playoffs significantly. West Virginia, to me, is one of the most underrated teams in college football this season, and I would not be surprised at all if they end up making the college football playoffs this year. If West Virginia is not the team I'm high on the most this year, then it's certainly Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, I think, is going to be very good this season. Last year, they were 7-6 and finished off strong, winning 5 of their 7 games. They avoided playing Florida State and Louisville, both teams who were in the ACC championship game last year. And they have a pretty manageable schedule. They play Miami in Miami on September 27th, and then they host Clemson on November 9th. A big reason why I'm so high on Virginia Tech this year is because they return the most starters of any team in college football this season. And more importantly, they return Kyron Drones. When you look at Kyron Drones' stats, they're pretty impressive, having 17 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Run for over 2,000 passing yards. He ran for over 800 yards, and he had 5 rushing touchdowns as well. But the last 4 or 5 games is really when Virginia Tech and Kyron Drones really started to get it going. And I think they're going to kind of, continue that success that they had towards the end of the season last year. Virginia Tech's last 4 games, Kyron Drones threw for 10 touchdowns and just 1 interception, and he averaged over 100 rushing yards a game in their final 4 games, having at least 50 rushing yards in each of those games. And in 2 different of those contests, he had 135 rushing yards or more in 2 of those games. I expect Kyron Drones to have a huge year for Virginia Tech. He played pretty good in his first year starting last year for the Hokies, and I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist this year. And if I had to pick right now, I'm taking Kyron Drones to win the Heisman this year. I know I might sound crazy, but I'm very, very high on the Hokies in Kyron Drones this season. With Drones only going to get better, they return the most starters in college football and having a pretty easy schedule, I expect the Hokies to definitely be in contention to make the college football playoffs this season. Final team who I think is a sleeper to make the college football playoffs this season is Texas State. Last year they were 8-5, and 3 of those 5 losses were by 1 possession, and they even ended up beating Baylor last year as well. Texas State has one of the best running backs in the country, Ishmael Mahdi. He had 1,300 rushing yards last season to go along with 10 rushing touchdowns. They lose TJ Finley to West Kentucky, but they get a better quarterback in Jordan McCloud. Jordan McCloud was the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year last season for James Madison. He had 3,900 total yards last season for James Madison. He had 35 passing touchdowns to go along with 8 rushing touchdowns. McCloud and Mahdi have to be one of the best quarterback or running back duos in college football right now. They have a pretty easy schedule. They take on Arizona State and UTSA in their out-of-conference games. And when it comes to conference games, there's really nobody that really stands out in my opinion. I think they'll end up beating UTSA and Arizona State and finish the season 12-0, and it's going to be that Sun Belt Championship game where we could potentially see a 12-0 Texas State team and an 11-1 Appalachian State team that either beat Clemson or Liberty, and whoever wins that game will end up going to the college football playoffs. Texas State is definitely a team to watch out for, and I think they're probably the most underrated Group of 5 team right now in college football. Those were 5 teams who I think are definitely, college football playoff sleepers as we head into the 2024 season. Comment your thoughts, comment some teams who you think are sleepers this season. That about does it for this video. If you're new to my channel or seen my videos before, make sure to like this video and hit the subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time on the Sports Studio Hines Show.